Oh, here we are.
We're live, Kevin. Yes, we're live. I'm broadcasting on the internet. So I'm talking to Surrey's Police and Crime Commissioner, Kevin Hurley. So thank you very much for taking part in this, Kevin. I think this is groundbreaking stuff, what we're doing here, because as far as I'm aware, I don't think this has ever been done with a PCC before.
Well,
which is really, really great. Now, so we're going to kick things off because we're limited to a bit of time. We put out on social media a couple of days ago that there's questions. If you want to ask the PCC any questions, put them on there, and the response has been fantastic. We've got about 10 or 12 questions there from people, so I'll really want to get stuck straight into this. But first of all, I just want to give you an opportunity to explain what the PCC is, the Police Crime and Commissioner, and what its area of responsibility is, because I actually think that a lot of people haven't got a clue.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Good. And I didn't like the way you were looking at me when you said I haven't got a clue. But anyway, okay, right. Police and Crime Commissioners, there's 41 of us up and down the country. If you count Boris Johnson in London, that's 42. We were set up in November 2012, the idea being to increase the local governance and visibility over policing and public safety in the county. The way we break down, there are 15 Conservative, 14 Labour and 12 Independent, and I'm Independent in Surrey. Our role really breaks down into two elements, and the key bit is the and crime bit.
Right.
10% of my job is overseeing what the police do and making sure they do the priorities the public give them. But the other 90% is, if you like, building partnerships to get the maximum out of everyone else who can contribute to safety. So by that I mean the 11 borough and district councils, whether it's Waverley, Spelthorne or so on, the county council, Crown Prosecution Service, court service, probation, prison service and voluntary agencies like Victim Support Scheme, rape crisis centres, and so on, Neighbourhood Watch, to get them working as closely together as possible so that we build a more cohesive approach to safety in the county and break down the silos, if you like. The best way to describe the job is I'm probably the combination of the voice, the Mr. Fix-It, the troubleshooter, or the progress chaser for the public on trying to make the place safer and getting everyone and helping everyone actually to do their job.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And it is a political role, isn't it? And you actually were elected into the position.
Yeah, absolutely. It is political. Originally, I offered to run for the Conservative Party, who rejected me because I wanted to get into this position because I thought, as a Surrey resident with a background in policing, I could help make the county I live in, my family and friends live in, that bit safer. But once I was knocked back, I decided to run as an independent, and here we are. Surprise, surprise! I won an election against another independent, the other Tories. I mean, what's interesting about this role, when people talk about the mandate, I in fact got 2 times the number of any single member in the county, and I believe it's a historical fact that no politician in the history of politics in this county has ever had as many votes cast for them as I have in this poorly supported Police and Crime Commissioner election. So I reckon next time round, probably be 4 times the number of votes cast there were this last time, whoever runs for this office, should it be me or someone else.
Yeah, I mean, it was poorly. The turnout was abysmal, actually, and I think a lot of that was to do with the bad marketing from the government, if you ask me. It was abysmal.
It was an impossible job, to get the word out, because of course it was the hardest post to run for in the country of any political post, because we had to put up £5,000 of our own money as a deposit, which is unusual. And unlike, for example, a councillor where you had to get 10 people on the voters register to
sign for you,
you had to get 100, which is no small ask.
No, it's not easy.
They have to be accurately recorded with their numbers. And it was a real challenge just to even get yourself into a position to run. When you think you're trying to get across 1.3 million people with no money whatsoever, not even a leaflet which even a basic borough councillor gets, it was very difficult. But for some reason or other, the Surrey public in the end, those who voted, I managed to get a sufficient majority to win.
Yeah, and especially so as an independent, I would imagine. If you would have been selected as a Conservative, Julie Isles was the Conservative candidate. She would have had the machine of the Conservative Party behind her to do a lot of that work for her. Where you, as an independent, you're pretty much on your own, aren't you?
Well, I was absolutely. I started off literally on my own. I had to learn how to do Twitter, which I think many people like Wayne Rooney did. And
now you tweet like a canary.
well, I like to think I tweet like a seagull, flying over people and then sometimes doing things to people below. But anyway, enough of that.
Well, actually,
Facebook, etc.
Funny you mentioned that. I mean, I only tweeted this morning because obviously there's an election coming up very soon, and I put out on my social media this morning that social media is for life, not just at election time.
Correct.
And one thing that I actually think you do very well in is your engagement. You know, whenever I mention you on Twitter with a question, you reply almost within minutes. And I notice you do that with other people as well, which is really refreshing, to be honest with you. So well done for that.
It's funny, Paul, but that might just be because I haven't got any friends and no one else.
Excellent. Right, now I want to get on to the next question very quickly, and if you could answer this as quickly as possible, and then we can get into the Q&A, which I think is what people are really interested in.
Yeah.
What is your background in policing? Because obviously people want to know that you have got half a clue what you're talking about.
Well, I come from what I understand is a unique policing family. My mum, my dad, my uncle were all in the Met Police. My two brothers were detectives with me in the Met Police. My two nephews are detectives in the Met Police, and my son is a detective in the Met Police. I understand the policing dynasty, as it's referred to, is unique in policing terms in the UK, or there are many replicated. So that's a family background. But what have I done? Well, I've done every role imaginable, from walk the beat in inner London to run the Surrey Regional Crime Squad, to write the strategic policing plan in Baghdad in Iraq, to do surveillance in Belgium, be an undercover police officer in Morocco, lead armed raids on bank robbers in banks, to running large boroughs in the west of London, Hammersmith and Fulham, Brixton Robbery Squad, done fraud investigation in the West Indies, counter-terrorism leadership in the City of London, and then with the FBI, Weapons of Mass Distraction Unit. I'll stop there because the list, I've done a bit, is what I might say.
Yeah, fair enough. I did actually, when I was doing some research for this the other day, I saw you on that Bravo channel when you were still serving, I think. Was it Fulham and Hammersmith or someone?
Yeah, I was the borough commander at Hammersmith and Fulham, which is one of the busier inner city boroughs in the country, where we developed a unique approach of, we called it a zero tolerance policing approach. I copied Bill Bratton in New York, and the media then decided to copy it and started to run a program called Brick Cops, Zero Tolerance Policing. Obviously the public seemed to like it because it's on its 150th repeat of a 10-part series. I'll tell you what's interesting about that, because it used to scare people and they thought, you're being too positive, too politically incorrect. It was a combination of being positive but maintaining the high standards of policing. So my officers became famous throughout the Met Police and my borough as being the smartest, polished shoes, hats on, shaving for work, being the politest but being the firmest. We never ran away from a confrontation, but we were always polite in being robust. Now, the best example of that is, you know, we had the inner city riots in inner London in 2011. We had the biggest shopping centre in Europe on our ground at Shepherd's Bush Green, the Westfield Centre, next to one of the more difficult estates to police, the White City Estate, and next to some of the more problem areas of Notting Hill. Our policing approach was such that we were the only inner city state in London, Liverpool, Manchester or Salford, or indeed Nottingham, that did not get rioting. What it shows you is firm, robust, professional policing works.
Yeah, and it's a tough neighbourhood. I mean, I come from Salford, which is a similar kind of neighbourhood, and it is tough there. And, and some of the
rough diamond, Paul.
and some of the things that he showed on that programme, You just don't believe happens on our streets, but it does.
I mean, we don't want to get too hyped up, but we have some problems, people in Surrey as well. Even though we're lucky, we live in the safest county in the country.
Yeah.
But there are some really bad things going on in this county, right beneath our noses, and we don't even see it.
Absolutely. Right. Let's get on to the main part of it.
Just told me about an old lady yesterday being conned by rogue traders out 2,000 quid. Those kind of things make me very, very angry.
And me. I mean, in my role as a counsellor, I often get, people say to me, "Oh, I got ripped off by this phone call that I had. They took over my computer, they got into my bank accounts, and they fleeced me." And that makes me mad too. So yeah. Now let's get straight into it now with the Q&A. Like I said, we had a really good response on social media and on the Residents Network blog. So we're going to go straight into it.
Can I make a request? If anyone can ask me anything about the military history of the Normandy landings, I'm happy to take those questions, but anything a bit hard.
We'll do that. We'll do that on another one, maybe.
Oh, Howard Jones is there. He can ask me one of those.
Right. Oh, well, he did retweet one of your tweets on this advertising the event. So hopefully he is, and there's quite a lot of people watching this live now. So
he's a very good counsellor down, I think, out in the Mole Valley way. Very good Tory.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah. Right. Let's get right into it. So the first question is from Hannah Louise. I'm going to try and keep these questions short because some of them ramble. So this one says, will there be an impact on Surrey Police if postnatal depression and domestic violence support are not tackled with services such as the Mitchett Sure Start Centre, which Surrey County Council want to close? Will this cause a drain on Surrey Police?
Well, I won't get into the specific battle about the Mitchett Sure Start Centre. But I think what I would say is any form of mental distress with the cutbacks in public service expenditure ends up flowing out onto the street in one form or another, domestic violence and so on. And the police are if you like, the government service, the local government service of last resort. So increasingly police are being called all the time to deal with mentally disordered people, distress situations that sometimes turn out as domestic violence, and are being abstracted to deal with that because of the cutbacks in government grant to our councils. That's a natural result of it. I mean, it's a fact, and the public ought to know this, that our county council have got a very difficult job. They are the worst funded in terms of government grant of any in the country, in the same way that our police force is the worst funded. What concerns me is we, the Surrey taxpayer, in fact, pay more than any other taxpayers in the country to the government, and I do wish we'd get a fairer crack of the whip back from government in terms of what they give to our county council, our local health commissioners, mental health commissioners, and, of course, the police.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's the Barnett form, you'll have heard of it. It's the reasons why the average resident in Scotland is getting £2,000 a year more public services than we are. Something's got to be done about the way Surrey residents are paying more than anyone else. And I constantly harp on to our members of Parliament and cabinet ministers about the unfairness. Look after our constituents, please.
Yeah, and when it comes to policing, that money that we pay as taxpayers, it has a direct impact on us. Yes, okay, I get the whole that sometimes we have to support other areas, and that some of the money that we pay in tax goes to the north and so on. But these are our streets that we want looking after too, right?
Well, you're right, Paul. I mean, the other issue is, if we talk about government grant, I'll give you a really interesting example about it. One of the things we do here is we provide funding to a group called Keep Out, and what they do is they take bunches of young people who are on the point of going into criminal justice offending, take them into Coldingley Prison, and there we've got a team of villains in there, frankly, serving long sentences for murder, drug dealing, robbery, and they sit down with these kids and they say, look, this is where you could end up if you carry on like this. And they spend a day working with them on a programme, then they bring them back again, and then we're having some good results. But because of government cuts, the other day when I went there, I learned that the social workers who were bringing these kids in are getting made redundant. They weren't from our county, they're a different one. But equally, our own county is having challenges in funding their end of the work. And also, when we wanted to get the prisoners unlocked to do this, if you like, diversion work with our own local kids, there weren't enough staff available to unlock them from their cells safety. So when you cut into everyone who's involved in keeping us safe, there's some real consequences about it. It ain't just the police's job. If we don't fund the prisons, we don't fund the prosecutions, social services properly, we can't, if you like, keep our businesses safe, our economy safe, so that it generates the tax base to pay for the good stuff like health and education.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that.
Which leads back to the Mitchett centre, that if there's not a good enough tax base, then we can't keep those places open. So we don't invest in everyone who keeps order. Then we don't get the profitability of companies being backed up because criminals steal from them.
Right. So I suppose the short answer then to Hannah Louise would be get in touch with your MP, who happens to be a very senior member of the government, and say, well, you know, stop cutting our funding.
Well, say more than that. Say, please do your job, look after your local residents and change the government funding formula for local councils. I know that our county council are really struggling to deliver against some very difficult issues. We've got to educate a lot more new children in the county now. We can't fill our potholes in, etc. They are doing a good job. Everyone wants to slag the councillors off. But across the piece, my view is, regardless of political cue, they're doing a good job. But we get the worst funding formula in the country. Yeah, you know, there's another issue why we're on it. You know, it's absolutely barking mad that we deliver policing in this county as part of 43 separate police forces. Actually, I think the public pay for officers patrolling, whether on the beat or in vehicles, and local detectives. They don't want to see loads of chiefs and bosses at headquarters. So why don't we merge our police forces and bring in the huge savings that are brought about by that? Make me redundant. Make the chief constable redundant. Use the money on us to pay for constables. They've done it in Scotland, and they're doing it in Norway. Why can't we do it here?
Right, that's an interesting idea, and I think that there's a question relating to that later on. So let's move on to the next question. Thanks for that question, Hannah Louise. Right, the next question is from Steve. Why does the PCC focus on long-term savings from forced mergers, but does not address short-term cost increases of the proposed mergers, and more importantly, the degrading of local accountability and danger of creating a centrally controlled police state? So that goes to the question or the principle of a forced merger.
Yeah, I mean, I've pretty much answered that. The bottom line on it is the funding. Police in every county are paid in two parts. One is by the government, what we call the police grant, and the other lump of money comes out of council tax. We in this county already pay more in council tax per head than anyone else in the country for our policing. However, government are cutting their section, if you like, their half of the money by 40%. Most of the cost of policing goes on actually paying the coppers and the people who answer the 999 calls, the fingerprint people, etc. If we're taking a 40% cut, which we are, we're going to lose a lot of people. I know that we're going to lose about 500 people over the next 4 years. I've got to find a way to keep people in the front line to serve the public. It is therefore a no-brainer that anything that's unnecessary, which is like loads of bosses in headquarters writing policy, could go. So if we can get someone to write the same policy of how we investigate rapes, murders, serious crime on behalf of Sussex and Surrey, that saves the job. If we can get one person on behalf of Sussex and Surrey to oversee the traffic police, that chops a superintendent. If we can get one person to oversee the helicopter, that chops up. What I'm trying to say is cut out the bosses, cut out the offices to put it in the front line. We need a long-term solution because it's stupid not to think in the short term. We will need to spend a few million in moving towards collaborating in whatever way we can. But the game I'm looking to save is of the order of 40% of the government grant. That is 40 million quid. I need to save 40 million quid long term over the coming years. At the moment, we've worked out how we can save 22 million quid long term over the coming years. We still don't know how we can save 18 million. So if we look at 10 years, I need to save 180 million. If I have to spend 2 or 3 million up front to bring out some more savings, you bet your life I'm going to do it.
Right. And
actually, if I was the government, I would take a truly brave decision and amalgamate all of the police forces, because your local accountability is delivered through your wards with your local ward sergeant, through your boroughs with your local inspector. Nobody in this borough has got a clue, in the county has got a clue who the deputy chief constable is, assistant chief constable. And quite frankly, if I didn't have a big mouth, most people wouldn't even know who I was. People want their policing done locally. If we had a national police force, it would still be done locally. It's just to have a lot less bosses and a lot less politicians, frankly, taking unnecessary public money.
Fair enough. And that
the facts are clear. 2 billion quid is wasted on the infrastructure of 43 police forces. 2 billion quid will buy us, and if we work it out, it's an easy one, would buy us, you get about 25 coppers for £1 million. That buys us getting on for 40 to 50,000 coppers. At the moment, because of the cutbacks, we're looking at 40,000 going off the books. It's obvious we must amalgamate police forces, or we are going to end up with no neighbourhood policing getting done anywhere in this country.
Okay, and the prospect of losing the prospect of losing 500 coppers off the beat is terrifying.
It won't only be coppers. It will be a combination of them. It will be some of the people who answer your phones when you want the police urgently. It will be some detectives who are doing fraud, conning old ladies. It will be people preventing child exploitation. We'll spread it. But I'll be honest with you, Paul. I've been in this job 2.5 years. And I know there's loads of stuff that aren't being done as well as I would like it. I think the police are pretty much trying to do their best. In fact, they do some great stuff. But I can tell you now, there's loads of failings that I see going on, and I'm not happy. And I'm not happy to see it get worse.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the next question. Thanks for answering that, and thank you, Steve, for that question. It was a good question. Who have we got next? Right. Councillor Katia Malkals-Cooper. She is a parish councillor for Windlesham Parish Councillor and represents Lightwater West, if my memory serves me correctly. Now, Katia asks, at a time of budgetary cuts, you said, quote, the cupboard is bare, and suggested merging 43 police forces to save money. What impact will this have on villages? Will villages and rural areas not lose out in favour of largely populated urban areas?
Well, I think what I've just said is we are absolutely certainly going to lose people off patrol function if we stand still and do nothing. So what I can guarantee to Katia and residents is in that local area, if we carry on our current course, you will see even less people on your streets than you see now. So that's the position. If we were able to merge, and I can't do that because I need the government to help me do that, if we were able to merge, I've told you that we would save 2 billion quid, which will give us maybe 40,000 costs. Let's say Surrey get their percentage of that. That's probably going to give Surrey 600-700 extra cops, as opposed to losing cops. So what would happen is if we merge, Katia, is you will get a lot more visibility on your streets. You're more likely to get more local cops, and you're more likely to get properly trained, well motivated fraud squad investigators if some of your residents get frauds or your business get fraud on them, and you'll get more people able to deal with child exploitation and more skilled people to deal with domestic violence, hate crime and sexual offences. So it's quite simple. If we amalgamate the forces, we can make a step change improvement in the way in which police is working. And I'll tell you, I've got some background. I didn't mention that one earlier, but I worked for a previous Home Secretary, the Majesty Inspector of Constabulary, where I personally led the inspections of Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Leicestershire and Lincolnshire Police, East Midlands Police, as to whether or not they should amalgamate. And it was a no-brainer that we were going to drive out hundreds of millions of savings that we could put back to more constables on the beat if we amalgamated those 4 police forces. It's exactly what the Scottish police have done. To give you an example, There were once 8 police forces in Scotland. They're now 1. That means there are now 7 chief constables with their entourages who do not need to be paid. I can tell you straight away, the average chief constable and their own local entourage is probably £300,000 or £400,000 of people off the back of them. So that's 3 million saved each year. That's 75 more coppers. Then you add in 7 deputy chief constables gone. That's another couple of million. Then you add in probably 15 to 20 chief superintendents saved. Then you start to add in probably 30 superintendents, 50 chief inspectors, all the PAs, all the offices, all the buildings. Very quickly, Police Scotland is going to be realising savings of hundreds of millions of a year. Now, each 100 million is another 2,500 coppers. Police Scotland is probably going to put another 2,500 coppers on the street over and above the approximately 20,000 they've already got, probably more. It's a no-brainer. We must. I mean, let's talk about McDonald's. So I don't want to come back to this one because it's wasting people's time. McDonald's delivers hamburgers, a service to us in hundreds and hundreds of shops all over our high street, and they have one national office that sets policy. We deliver a similar service all over our high streets from police stations, but we have 43 headquarters setting our policy. The difference between us and McDonald's is that we've had to sell all our shops because we haven't got any police stations left, so we can keep our headquarters open. You know, if McDonald's can do it that way, why on earth won't government grasp the bullet and amalgamate? I can tell you virtually every chief constable in the country who are professionals know it is a no-brainer and want to amalgamate their police forces so they can put more cops out on the street to protect you. Our own Chief Constable, Lynn Owens, is leading, if you like, the cry, saying, let's amalgamate with our sister forces and take the cost out. So I hope, you know, that's clear.
Okay. I think we've done mergers to death, so let's move on. But thanks for that, and thank you, Katia, for your question.
Thank you.
Right, so we've got a question from Frank. Now, I actually know Frank. I know Frank well. He's a young guy, lives in Frimley, and this is his question to you. What plan do the police have to improve relations between themselves and young people?
Well, this is this thing we're constantly aware of. What's pretty unusual with Surrey police is the approach we take. But let's make one thing absolutely clear. Ever since I joined the police, no, wrong. When I was a teenager, I got stopped and searched by police officers when I was gobbing off to them. I got shoved against a shop front and told to shut up in front of my mates because I was being clever with a group when we outnumbered cops. And I didn't like to be told. I thought I was being ever so funny with my scooter outside some cafe in a quiet neighbourhood, revving up and down. But you know what? The neighbours didn't like it.
Yeah.
And the police had to deal with it. So there's always going to be an issue with young people that they are in the space where perhaps some people call police and want them to be quieter, moderate their behaviour, and police come along and intervene. And if you're a young person, well, frankly, you're an old person, but particularly if you're a young person, you don't like to be told. Unfortunately, it's the job of police to say, cut that out, behave. Now, what can we do to behave to improve relationships? We could put more money into training for police officers how to handle strategies with kids and problem situations, but because we're skint and we haven't got any money, we're not going to be doing that, because I've just talked about we haven't got any money. So what we could do is we could try to get more involved with young kids and young people about how they fit in society. And indeed, my deputy, Jeff, is leading on what we're calling junior citizens, where we're trying to get into all the schools to help young people understand what they should be doing to play their part in society. My own, I get out and visit all the various colleges and schools, talking with people. I was at Brooklands College the other day, explaining the role of myself and police, listening to the concerns. But I suppose locally, what the big thing that Surrey does that's different elsewhere is, our officers are really big on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. They're getting into Snapchat. They're getting into ways to address young people. But the truth of the matter is, it is the job of the police in the end to say to people, enough is enough, sort yourself out, behave, and not everyone likes that. And sometimes that causes difficulty. And because young people can sometimes, quite unfairly, be tarnished by older residents as a nuisance, a noise, or whatever, the older residents call police come along, and you can get confrontations. It's always been that way since I was a kid. It was that way when I was in the police, and it's that way now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I understand young kids need some space, but do you know what? When I'm in my high street where I live up in a village off near Esher, I don't like the way the kids all go outside the kebab shop and sit there, blocking up the pavement, throwing the kebab wrappers on the floor, revving their scooters up. I don't like it. It's unpleasant. And I wish they wouldn't do that. So that's the reality of it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Kevin, because there's actually another question from the other end of the scale relating to exactly what Frank is saying. So perhaps what we'll do is, rather than you, we'll come back, we'll revisit that, and perhaps Frank might be able to see.
For example, what I'd also like to emphasise is, young kids get unfairly demonised often,
Yes.
and they do some great stuff. We've got young kids involved in engaging with old people. We've got young kids in all sorts of community projects. So we've all got to try and get along. But the difficulty you've got with police, and I suppose this might answer a lot more questions. We often talk about the police by consent. Well, the reality of that is that actually isn't true. If you're parking your big 4x4 Range Rover outside the school, dropping your kids off in the morning, blocking people trying to get to work, blocking safe crossing of the road for other kids, and a cop comes along and says, move on, quite often the mum driving that Range Rover objects to being policed. She doesn't like it. So she doesn't please to being policed by consent. And do you know what? She resents the copper telling her off. Equally, when we think we've had a good night with our friends and we're all piling out at the wine bar or curry house one night at a celebration, we think it's great fun, and we're all getting a bit wrapped up in ourselves. If a cop pulls up and says, will you calm down, please, you're upsetting local residents, it's like, oh, what's his attitude? We don't like that either. Yeah. So being in the police is a difficult job because we have to tell people, think about other residents.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thanks for that. And thank you, Frank, for your question. Good question. Let's move on. We've got another question from a young person, Amelie. Now, I forget where Amelie lives. I think it might be Leatherhead Way, but I know that she works in Guildford. And this is her question. Excuse me. What sort of support do the police provide to young people in Surrey in order to prevent them getting into crime? That's her first question. She's got two questions. What? The second question is, what is the most interesting case you've ever worked on?
Right, okay. Well, I'm not sure I can actually talk about the most interesting case we've worked on because a lot of people don't know about them, but we'll see. I'll come up with something. Let's talk about support young people and get them into crime. First and foremost, I mentioned Jeff Harris trying to get this idea of junior citizens going across kids, how they can contribute to being a more responsible citizen, how they can play their part in society. Then the next thing we're doing is we're now rolling out, with the help of Eagle Radio, if I might give them a plug, enhanced education about the problems and crimes that get caused through online media. Saying if you bully someone on media, pick on someone on media, it ain't funny, it's bullying, it's nasty, and frankly, it's a crime. We're doing stuff like where kids are right on the edge of offending. We are funding from this office schemes teaching kids how to get involved in rebuilding cars, rebuilding their self-esteem, working in a team. We're helping fund Surrey Fire Brigade initiatives where they take people off for a week and train them to be firefighters to give them a sense of self-worth. I mentioned earlier that we're funding these diversionary activities called Keep Out to help persuade kids not to get involved in policing. We're setting up volunteer police cadets in the future to get more people involved in that, and actually providing a visible patrolling presence. They'll get a bit of a police uniform as well. So we're doing really a whole host of different initiatives to kind of assist young people. And we've funded skate parks, we've funded youth clubs, we've funded all kinds of different organisations and societies. out of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner to try and help young people who might be right on the edges of crime. But another one, we are funding drug prevention schemes, drug action schemes, where some young people are getting involved in drugs. And only the other day, I was speaking with two really far-thinking senior educationalists. One's a headmistress of a major school, the other one's a deputy principal of a major educational college. They're working out ways how we can stop drugs being brought into our colleges and schools. So we're trying all kinds of stuff.
Okay, that's great. And
if anyone's got an idea, let us know. Get involved. Young person in contact with me recently about how could we come up with a phone-in line for young people to tell us about drugs being dealt in schools. And so I've actually got young people engaged now working on a project of how we can do a kind of Crime Stoppers phone-in line anonymously and tell us who's bringing the drugs into your schools.
That's a great idea. I like that a lot.
Kids' idea, not mine. Kids' idea.
Great idea. Okay, and the second part of the question from Amelie was, what is the most interesting case you've worked on? And I suppose really that's in your time as a copper rather than the piece.
I suppose it's a pretty horrific one, but it kind of takes it to the point. It was a serial nighttime rapist gang. What they were doing is they were breaking into flats in an inner city area in inner London and really brutally attacking young women in these flats at night. And it was really quite extraordinary because we didn't have a clue who was doing it. They weren't leaving any particular forensics about or whatever. And I can remember the best way to solve these crimes is you have to try to get into the mind of the offender. It's just like these crimes are almost solved a bit like, Morse or Frost or whatever. And I can remember one Sunday morning walking onto the balcony of this inner city estate and standing outside the property in my suit and looking up and looking at this building. And I got approached by a middle-aged woman who came up to me and said, in kind of in the London jargon, "You're the police, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "Oh, I'm having problems with my son. He keeps all sorts of hours, strange hours, and won't and so on, and disrespects me a lot." "Oh, tell me about it." "Oh, well, he's just come out of prison for doing a bit of robbery." I said, "Okay, lovely." Well, and I told her how she could get an injunction if necessary to chuck her problem son out, or she could try social work. And she walked off. And I watched her walk through the estate. And in the far distance, I watched her put the key of a house key into a door. And as she put her house key into the door, our eyes met like 100 yards away. And we met each other's glance. And I thought, she's just been telling me she thinks it's her son, but can't tell me.
Oh, right.
So, the very next day, I got up a team of detectives and we researched the area, and we put the guy's front door in and we arrested him, and he fought us because he didn't want to be arrested, and during I didn't want to be arrested, and we then started the search, and we found, it was unbelievable, bizarre, we found there was only one novel in his house, and it was a story of a nighttime rapist who used to watch his neighbours' houses and then attack them. Oh. And in his kitchen, which overlooked where several of these attacks had occurred, hidden in a set of kitchen drawers was a big pair of high-powered binoculars, all really quite creepy stuff. So anyway, we found property that had been stolen from these various burglaries where the rapes had occurred. Handwritten cassette tapes by the poor victims and stuff like this. But we knew there were two of them involved. And on the DNA we took from him, it didn't come back as his DNA on the victims. He was denying it, but he had a bit of a problem in that we had the property. So we knew there was someone else who was actually the rapist. Well, we also were cultivating some undercover informants, grasses, if you like, informers, snouts in the police parlance. And one of my officers who was operating informant, one of my detectives, said he'd spoken to one of the other criminals on the estate who said, "You should have a look at such and such a name. is mates with the person you brought in for those rapes. So we started to research who this person was. And we didn't really have a lot of evidence on this particular guy, but we got his pictures in. The one thing we had recovered from one of the forensic scenes was a footprint where someone had trodden on a work surface in a kitchen, which was for a squash shoe, a high-tech squash shoe. And the unusual thing about high-tech squash shoes is they're not flash and nobody in the inner city wears them. Only old wusses like me who used to play squash will wear a high-tech squash shoe because they're not like top quality. And I thought, this is unusual. And I thought, whoever's wearing high-tech squash shoes must be doing these rapes because obviously the squash shoe was there. Well, one day as I was out walking through this inner city street with a mate, I saw someone walking along with high-tech squash shoes. So I stopped him, I searched him, we had a bit of a confrontation. He had no previous convictions, but no reason to think he was a baddie, actually. But we recorded his name and details and address. And when I went back to the police station, I found that the name that had been given up as a potential running mate of the other burglar was the guy I'd stopped on the street only a few hours earlier with high-tech squash shoes on.
Wow.
Call me Clouseau if you want, but I thought time we pop round and put his door in.
Yeah, I suppose police work is, there's got to be some element of luck, but also this really die-in-the-wool detective work.
Yeah, but I'm all of that. But the interesting story, and it shows you how nothing in police work is simple, because as we went in to search his house, his mum went absolutely mental, screaming at all her neighbours, come and help me, the police are coming in the house. She fell down on the floor screaming, the police are beating me, the police are beating me. And we're like stood there thinking, well, should we go and get a cup of tea and wait till she stops screaming, then we'll come back? But at this stage, this was starting to create a bit of a hostile crowd outside the house. So we started searching the house and we found loads of stuff coming from the burglary. And we searched it upside down, but there was no sign of the suspect. But there was a picture on the wall of the suspect who looked just like the bloke I'd stopped on the street. And I thought, well, it must be him. Where is he? We said. And his mum said he's round his girlfriend's. So I left, quite frankly, one of our, how can I put it, laziest old cops at the house till we came back, who sat down on the edge of the bloke's bed to wait while we went round to see the guy's girlfriend. And while we were there, perfectly decent Christian family, they were horrified that we were after her boyfriend, etc. We then got a quick radio call from this cop we'd left there to sit on the edge of the bed and have a rest. He said, boss, I think you better come back. I said, why? He said, I heard a slight noise at the bottom of the wardrobe and I moved this pile of old coats and he was hiding under the coats. Cut a long story short, we had been there for over an hour and a half searching. We'd moved the coats about, but because for some reason someone hadn't looked quite properly, he was still hiding at the bottom of the wardrobe. Right. So he was nicked. He completely denied everything. He came back on DNA for doing the 3 separate dreadful attacks. And I had the great pleasure at the Old Bailey of seeing the judge sentence him to 14 years imprisonment on each count. Fantastic. One of the most satisfying offences and convictions I've ever had, because the victims were all there. And I can remember to this day, one of the victims, her father had been a paratrooper. And kind of the way police go the extra mile is on the day of the sentencing, she was really scared to come along and see the victims. On the day of it, because I'd been one, I wore my parachute regiment tie. And she said, you wore my dad's tie. That meant a lot to me. So that's kind of what cops do. It was for me, that was a special moment catching those 3 people. And I was only disappointed they didn't get life imprisonment as opposed to 14 years.
Well, that must be that frustrating part, because obviously you get to arrest them, but you don't get to sentence them. I suppose in a lot.
These criminals are like. It's amazing, Paul.
Yeah.
A few days later, the sister of one of these villains turns up at the police station and says one of the things we seized was a TV set involved in one of the burglaries. and said, we want his television back. He's just gone to prison for 14 years, and the family have come back and said, we want his television. And I'm at the front counter of the police station saying, no, you can't. They start to create a semi-riot at the front counter, screaming and shouting at me, get the television back. And saying, no, because he's nicked it from a victim. I cannot believe what some people are like out there. People forget, you know, what our cops have to put up with on our behalf on a day-to-day basis. So that was probably what I left out of it. These people tried to escape from the dock at the Old Bailey in front of the judge and jury when the judge said take them down. And my colleague and I, we actually in our suits had to run along the barristers' tables, knocking over their papers, their glasses of water and crafts of water, and literally vault into the dock at the Old Bailey and help the prison officers overpower these two violent rapists and push them through the doors to commence their prison sentence.
Very rewarding. Well, thanks for that, and thanks for your questions, Amelie. I'm sure you'll agree Kevin's provided a fascinating insight there into some of the police work that goes on. Excellent. Let's move on, and we're going to have to move it along a little bit now, Kevin. We've got a question here from Paul Chapman, who I happen to know visited you yesterday. So he's hogging the limelight a little bit here again.
Yeah, Paul's running as a UKIP parliamentary candidate throughout your way, isn't he?
He's also running as a borough councillor, and actually he's a very good guy, very community-spirited guy.
He's like a good man to me. You know, he's a proper person, a professional chemical engineer.
Yeah, that's right.
Working in industry, so you know, he seemed like a nice guy. I'm not going to say what.
So we'll let him have a question, as he's such a good guy. So his question is, would an American-style 3 strikes and you're out approach for repeat offenders be beneficial to getting persistent criminals off our street? Try and make this a quick answer, please, Kevin.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I think I said earlier, there's a load of different ways you prevent crime: diverting people from getting into crime, trying to rehabilitate them in prison, and also looking after them when they come out. However, there are some people, and it tends to be young males between the ages of 16 and 25, who only stop offending when they grow older, or a decent woman sorts them out. That's basically what happens. Up until that point, some of them need to be locked up, frankly warehoused, until they get a bit of sense. And if 3 strikes are out, works for some of these people, I think for certain types of offences, particularly people who burgle our houses, deal drugs to our children and young people, rob us on the street, I'm all for it.
Okay, great. That's good.
Because it will work. Because I don't care what it does to them, but I'll tell you this, they can't thieve from us or deal drugs to our children when they're locked up on D-Wing in Coldingley.
Quite right, quite right. Okay, thank you. And thanks for your question, Paul Chapman. So next question is from Richard. Let's have a look here. In 2013, HMIC produced a report that said, despite budget cutbacks in Surrey, police officer numbers are planned to increase by 14%. So Richard's question is, have you achieved this, and if not, why not? And why are you predicting 500 frontline cuts? This is at odds with the report.
No, it's not. It's absolutely in line with it. HMI also said we have got the best financial management plans for budget of all 43 forces in the country. The Chief Constable and their team have done a great job. I won't take any of their credit, but feel free to vote for me next year if you wish. Back to the point. It's absolutely true. By the scheme whereby we sold off police stations and moved neighbourhood officers to work more closely with council officers on neighbourhood issues in your town halls, we're able to free up a lot more money to pay for another 200 cops on the beat. So at the moment, you've actually got more cops on the beat per capita than anyone else in the country, which is the point HMIC were making. That said, the government cuts are now really starting to hit us. And there are no ifs or buts about it. In 4 years' time, I will be down by at least 18 million in our budget. 18 times 25, if you do the numbers, is pushing us up to 500 cops. That's why we will lose 500 cops in 4 years' time, because our budget is being cut by that much. At the moment, we've done well. We've maximised on reducing some of the back office functions or sharing stuff with some of our neighbouring police forces. that we're replicating. But the fact is, we are now going to be looking at reducing numbers over the coming years.
Okay, we've already covered that, so we don't need to do that to death. He also has another question, so let me just bring that up here. 1 second. So he also asks, why are you also asking for more money from householders when your response to HMIC report was to merge police forces? You have been told by central government to cut your cloth, yet you are still trying to increase funding through the back door, i.e. council tax. What would you say to that?
You're absolutely right. He's absolutely right. I am trying to increase funding from the council tax because I don't want to have to lose about 500 staff in 4 years' time. I mean, what people should realise, and I've said it a number of times for those joining it late, we pay more than anyone else in council tax for policing in this country. We are the majority shareholders in paying for the police. But the fact is, government serves this county so badly that if the public, including, I'm sorry, what's the name of the questioner?
Richard.
If Richard wants to see the same level of policing, we're going to have to pay more in the council tax. Otherwise, it's going to be cut. No ifs or buts. I'm the messenger. I'm telling you the facts. And if Richard doesn't like it, you'll have less coppers. Don't vote for me next time, eh? Okay.
Thanks for that. And thank you, Richard, for your questions. Let's have a look. Another councillor question here from Councillor Dave Allen. Now, Dave is a Frimley Green councillor, but has a business in Frimley. And Dave's question is, retailers not taking up technology that allows instant reporting of crime in progress to Surrey Police. Devices cost approximately £20 per month, which is not helping the take-up rate. What can you do to provide a similar, more cost-effective technology? I mean, there must be more cost-effective technology than that out there. The telephone, for a start. What's up with 999?
Well, you can't get people to answer the phones quick enough. That's the problem, Paul. Because we haven't got enough people to do it. Right. I mean, actually, 999's been answered quickly, but the 101 number, because of staffing issues, again because of finance, you wait ages sometimes to get the 101 number answered. In terms of what more cost-effective technology can we pay for or provide, it all comes down to what should we spend our money on, because I've already said we're going to have to cut numbers of officers dealing in all kinds of areas. So I guess my answer here is retail crime is important, because if companies don't make profits, they don't pay corporation tax, they don't take business rates, people get made redundant, it is important. But that's why we must invest more money in policing so that we can look after them. But the fact is, if we don't get more money coming into our budget, policing in this county will get worse. And if ever you had a bloke who's an expert on policing in a political position in this country, it has got to be me, because no one has done as much as me who's in politics at the moment. And I'm telling you, there's nothing more I can do to reverse the effects of the cuts.
Right, okay. Well, thanks for that, and thank you, Dave, for your question. It's actually very nice that we're getting local councillors involved in this hangout. It's really great, and it's great that they're embracing social media. I've got another one here from Councillor Josephine Hawkins. Josephine represents Parkside Ward in Surrey Heath. Now, her question is, what does he, as in you, consider to be his greatest achievement since coming into post as the Police Crime Commissioner? Over to you.
Raising public awareness nationally about the effect of cuts in policing to public safety nationally, which is now starting to get the attention of central government, because I know, because of conversations I've had up to some of the highest levels in government, I suppose would be one. But locally, I think helping people build enhanced partnerships with our excellent borough and district councils to deliver on public safety against some of the difficult challenges. So, for example, in the borough of Reigate and Bampstead, we have rolled out a joint enforcement project against antisocial behaviour. They've done the same in Spelthorne. Running Mead are looking at it. But on a more right down to earth thing, one of the things that I'm really pleased we've managed to achieve is in our hostels for battered women and battered children, we've made this to do something unique. When a family of kids and a mum end up going to a hostel, they move somewhere else in the county for their safety, and the kids are placed in a terrible situation the next day of going to school in the wrong school uniform and looking awkward and looking different.
Yeah.
We've managed to raise additional funding to give grants to all our hostels so that we can provide the appropriate local school uniforms on day one, so those children don't need to go through the trauma of that. So it's a mixture of stuff. If you like, the most basic level is looking after the most vulnerable children when they go to school. Like at the intermediate level, working with the councils to enhance the ability to deal with antisocial behaviour. And at the grand strategic level, raising awareness amongst the press nationally and the public about what the effects of cutting back on police and prisons are doing to our safety. Okay. That's why I continue to labour on, and next year I will be saying much more about it.
Okay.
I'm honest with you, this year, by not holding the referendum, I've let our local MPs off the hook, be in no doubt. I will be raising it next year, and I expect better, please, boys and girls.
Fair enough, fair enough. And just on the couple of the points you've made there, as far as those fluorescent, the school uniforms are concerned, that must be awful to a kid to arrive at a school not knowing anyone in a different school uniform. You might as well put a fluorescent jacket on him.
Indeed. Exactly.
So I think that's a very worthwhile scheme. And on your point about working with the local authorities, I know that you come under quite a lot of criticism early on in your tenure about closing some of the local police stations, the smaller police stations. And if you take Surrey Heath as an example, you moved the police out of Portersbury Road into the council offices and co-located. And I've got to say I think that's been a success. It's great that because it means that they're all in the same building, and if they've got something they need a partner on, it's just a matter of walking across to someone's desk and they can just get on with it instead of adding more layers of bureaucracy and communication problems. So, in my view, I think that's been a success and definitely it's obviously saved money.
Well, that's how we paid for the 200 extra coppers, by doing exactly that. You know, no one wants the idea of a police station to be sold off, but actually what you want is cops doing stuff.
Yeah.
And what we've managed to do is put an extra, effectively, nearly an extra 20 coppers into every single borough area.
Right, fair enough. Okay, well, let's move on to the next question because we're doing quite well considering.
We can do it a bit longer if you want, Paul. Like, my other appointment's dropped off, so if you want to do a few more.
Okay, that's fine. So let's go to, excuse me, Barbara. Question from Barbara here. Given that national statistics show that 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted in the UK, what is the Police Crime Commissioner doing to encourage women to report assault and to demonstrate the police will take such reports seriously in Surrey? Good question.
Well, I mean, what's good at the moment is our offence reporting rate of sex offences in Surrey is going up in leaps and bounds, showing that Surrey women, and indeed men who are victims of similar assault, are much more confident about the service that they will receive. I'm not happy still about the conviction rate, but we've put a huge amount of time into building on that. But we, for example, now of giving a lot of additional funding to some of our rape support centres and so on. And I would always encourage anyone to come forward with that. But let me tell you, you know, some of the ethnic minority communities are less willing to come forward and talk to the police. So we're now investing in some people from ethnic minority communities reaching out to the women of those and saying, come and work with the police. These are the issues. I was once in that kind of situation of domestic violence, sexual assault. This is how the police will deal with you, how they will help you.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, and thank you, Barbara, for the question. I thought that was a really good question. The next question was via Twitter by @KellyMarieLD. I assume LD stands for Lib Dem, looking at her profile picture. And she's got 2 questions. The first one is, how do we tackle rising violent robbery crimes, the only crime to rise in recent years in Surrey? And a second question, what is being done to record and tackle disability hate crime in Surrey? That's something that I wasn't aware was a problem here, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Marie's in fact I think she's a Lib Dem candidate for Guildford, if I'm not mistaken, in the elections.
Okay.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we're talking very small numbers here about robbery, and in fact there is only one form of robbery, and that's violent, because what robbery means, you steal something from someone and use threats or violence on them. I think the issue on it is, because there is some quite significant wealth in Surrey, organised criminal gangs in tiny numbers will come in and come after the wealth held in some houses for their gold, for their jewellery, and those are the kind of offences we're speaking about. So what we've done, if you like, at a strategic level, is we have formed a regional organised crime unit, crime squad, with Sussex, Kent, Hampshire and Thames Valley, to have a large team of specialist detectives who can focus on the organised criminal gangs who come into our county and predate on us. Because you can't deal with those people with a bobby on the beat. You can't deal with them with a local detective. You've got to put surveillance on them. You've got to put informants into them. You might even actually have to put listening devices in their houses to see what they're up to. So we've now formed a joint partnership to do that. On top of that, we run a number of major operations on robbery, burglary teams coming into the county. We've got an excellent new Deputy Chief Constable who's come in from the Metropolitan Police, Nick Fgrave. He's in fact the one who convicted the murderers of Damilola Taylor. You may remember.
Right, yeah.
Nigerian boy murdered in Peckham.
Yeah.
He did a fantastic job. This guy is a machine when it comes to systems and tactics to reduce burglary and robbery. That's why we're now solving 4 times the number of burglaries in this county we were doing this time last year. That's why burglary is down by 400 offences this year in the county. And he's bringing that same kind of intellectual rigour and fantastic detective skills to deal with robbery. But it's tiny numbers. You know, we're talking about literally less than 10 in terms of the increase. But the problem with it is Surrey's a very wealthy county, and that's why these criminals come into it. To be frank, that's why I invite the Surrey public to think about paying more on their council tax, so we can have a lot more visible street policing to act as a deterrent. It comes down to this: the government aren't giving us enough money. If the Surrey public feel they want to pay £1 a week more in their council tax, then I can put hundreds more visible police patrolling on our streets to deter and stop and search these criminals when they come into the county. Now back to disability-related crime. All crime, regardless of whatever it is in terms of the source we called it, we've got a specialist, what we call public protection unit, in our 3 major investigation centres. In the west, it's at Staines. In the centre, it's Guildford, and over in the east, it's Reigate. These people deal specifically with all forms of hate and disability-related crime. But of course, if ever there's a specific case that someone's concerned about, always grateful to know about it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks for that, and thank you, Kelly Marie, for your questions. Really appreciate that. Now, the next question is an anonymous question, and it says, Surrey Police has decided to withdraw school visits from building relationships with young people at schools. Isn't that a negative approach to building a cooperative and cost-effective relationship with the public?
Yes. However, let me explain. What we're talking about here is we used to have a dedicated team of schools liaison police community support officers whose sole job was to work in local schools around the county. Because of the cuts in expenditure, we couldn't afford to keep people just doing that role. So what we are now doing is getting the local patrolling police community support officer and local beat bobby who work the specific area where the school is to take on that job. So it's now their job to go into the schools and meet with the kids, meet with the pupils and spend time there. And frankly, that's a much better way of doing it because they are the local officer who they will see on patrol around their school. So only the other day, I was over at one of the schools in the borough of Spelthorne, where we were going to develop a scheme to bring that one forward. And indeed, I was over at Brooklands College coming up with a mechanism to get local officers to spend much more time with the young people there. So this is absolutely what we want to do, but we can't afford now to have people whose sole job it is to go into schools and do nothing else.
Fair enough.
Schools liaison. And frankly, it's far better if it's the local cop who knows the area, who knows the local schools, not someone who comes once a fortnight, or no, probably once a month to that school and then goes away and goes to the other side of the county.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid it's austerity. We haven't got enough people to do it all.
Okay, fair enough. And thank you, Anon, for your question.
Oh, good question. Spot on.
Yeah, really good questions. Next one. Actually, this is the last question, and then I've got a question for you, and then we can wrap it up. So this is from a Camberley retailer, and he actually has two questions, or she. What measures are police? Excuse me. What measures are police taking to combat drunken brawls within the town centre? That's the first question. And the second question relates to what Frank was saying earlier, but at the other end of the scale, and that is what measures are being taken in future to combat teenage congregation within town centres and underage drinking, smoking and swearing that comes with it. So obviously this person is probably fed up with some of the nuisance used in the area.
Yeah. Well, I mean, drunken brawls, that comes down to ensuring that people aren't served drinks to the state where they become incapable of reasonable behaviour.
Yeah.
One of the things that police are doing is working with licensees to make sure they don't encourage drunkenness on licensed premises. There are other issues about, well, I mean, what police also do is they monitor when we get these incidents, and they put extra staff on late into the evenings on a Friday, Saturday night, so they can deal with drunken brawls in the town centre. But there is a limit, as I say, to what is achievable with the resources available. More rigorous enforcement, of course, if we can get images to get people worked. But I'm afraid it goes back to what I'm saying is, you need visible patrolling cops to deal with that kind of behaviour and tell people to behave themselves and go home. If we haven't got the money, you're not going to get it. Now, moving on to the other one, which is semi-demonising young people, which, of course, I don't like to see, but I do understand the point that young people can take up public space in a way that concerns people or be antisocial in their behaviour. What we're doing at the moment is, I've said before, in Reigate and Banstead and now Spelthorne, we've set up patrolling council enforcement officers in fluorescent yellow jackets, body-worn cameras, working with police to do much more about antisocial behaviour. I have been in dialogue with the council over at Surrey Heath to say, would you like to participate in that? And I will be looking to do more, hopefully with the support of residents and people like yourself, to hope that with Surrey Heath they will become more involved in dealing with some of those aspects. We look at all sorts of things that we can do, CCTV and so on, but Paul, the reality of it is we haven't got the money to do too much more different at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Camberley retailer. Really appreciate the question. And I also understand your concern.
In a kind of way, Paul, if I could put a close on this, I understand people's senses of frustration, but this is democracy. And the key things that people need to understand is that our money's been cut, our numbers are being cut, the money we can put into training people is being reduced, and worse still, because our people are paid at national rates, we have got the worst attrition rate of trained police officers in the country because they can't afford to buy property here, which means we need to waste more money in recruiting quicker than we should and waste more money in training. I invite anyone watching to write to their members of parliament and say, come on, do something about the unfair funding settlement for Surrey Police, because our poor old police commissioner, as you can see, has torn his hair out.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Well, that's really good. Now, I've got a question for you now, because you recently held a crime summit at Camberley Theatre only a week or two ago. We did an interview there, and that's how this idea of doing a live broadcast has developed from that. Because obviously there was a good turnout, but obviously not everybody can make it on a Friday night and all the rest of it. So we've used this technology, or exploiting this technology, so that we can have a wider audience. And you mentioned there about the rises that you want to impose on council tax to pay for this shortfall in government funding, and you equate it to £1 a week.
Well, Paul, I'll stop you there. I don't want to impose them. I want to tell the Surrey public how much money it needs to deliver the services to keep policing the way we want it, and ask them, do they want to pay it? I don't want to impose it.
All right.
I want to say to them
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thanks for correcting me on that. But let me just finish the question. At the summit, you equated the extra £1 a week to about the cost of a Mars bar.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, as a parent with a young family, with an 8-year-old daughter that's at school, and all the rest of it, that's not something I would have a problem paying personally. However, £50 a week, £1 a week, 50 odd pound a year to some people is a lot of money. Also, when you take into consideration the fact that the Borough Council only last night, which I voted for, is going to raise council tax in this area. The County Council are also going to raise their level of, or their proportion of the council tax. And with you as well, everyone wanting more out of the taxpayer, that 50 quid actually then starts to mount up to more when you take everything else into consideration. Yeah. How do you justify that?
Well, I don't. What I do is I say to the Surrey public, this is what's going to happen to your policing. This is how much it will cost if you don't want it to happen. So the offer is, if you want to pay this amount of money, this is what will happen to your policing. And if you don't, it will get worse. So what I do is I am intending to have a groundbreaking piece of local democracy here. I'm going to ask the Surrey public and say, are you happy to see your police get worse? If so, fine, no problem. Or would you like them to get better? It will cost you X amount. And if they say yes, then we will put the council tax up. But if the Surrey public say to me they don't want to do it, I won't put it up. So frankly, Paul, I don't have to justify it to anyone. I just tell the public the facts. And if the public then vote yes, if I do a referendum, then the problem is solved.
Yeah.
I want the Surrey public. This is what they do in Switzerland, you know. The Swiss government, if they're deciding to buy some more aeroplanes for their air force, they have a referendum.
Yeah.
If they're deciding to raise tax to pay for more hospitals, they have a referendum. What I'm doing is saying to the public, this is, do you want to do this or not? It's not me. I don't have to justify it.
Right. Kevin, with some great questions there from members of the public, some incredible engagement going on here. I think anybody who says they don't care about the police, needs to listen to this. And obviously, it's something that people do care passionately about. A real privilege to speak to you today, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more. But just before we end the broadcast, messages you'd like to get out to the community and take this up.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first point is this is a pretty safe place to live in, but it's incumbent on all of us to do a bit more if we can, rather than sit back and gripe and whinge and moan or say, poor me, this is unfair. So get involved with your neighbourhood watch scheme and do your bit. Step up to the plate if you think you can stop a bit of wrongdoing by someone and you think you can do it with reasonable safety. Think about being a special constable. Think about volunteering to get involved in mentoring young people. Don't sit back there and whinge and moan and say it's everyone else's problem. Get off your butts, if you can, and do a bit more. Join your neighbourhood watch. Volunteer for Surrey Search and Rescue. Help everyone around us, because there is not enough money anymore to expect government to solve all our issues for us. Thank you for listening.
Kevin Hurley, thank you very much.